Paul Krishnamurty, thank you so much for joining me on the other side of the world during this COVID crisis, pandemic that's going on. Thanks for your time. What are you doing at the moment during COVID? Are you betting on anything like the politics market, which we'll get to in a second?
Politics.
Really?
I'm just doing the politics. I'm keeping a low one, really. I am highly inclined to get into this Korean baseball, and I certainly, when baseball's back on America, I'll be getting back into that again. Haven't bet on that for a few years, but I like it. It's got potential, I think.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, we might as well transition to your politics betting. What have you noticed in terms of the growth on Betfair, or betting in general, in terms of the appetite and the liquidity for betting on politics?
It's just grown insane, really, in the last 10 years. When you compare it, as I say, to when I was at university, when I first got involved in that, you'd phone up a bookie and ask them for an odds on, how many seats the Conservatives were going to win. No one even knew what you were talking about, right? You could get all sorts of mistakes out of them. Now it's like, the two biggest markets, I think, ever on Betfair were the Trump-Clinton election and the EU referendum, the Brexit referendum. And as I understand it, this year's American election, they're running at 3 times the volume already of 2016.
I didn't know that. I thought it'd be bigger. I didn't realise it was already smashing it. Wow. And
we're 6 months out.
Was there a tipping point that sort of increased the attention that those markets got? Was there something in particular that happened?
I think it was that referendum myself. I think that it was already definitely growing. There was a lot of money around for the 2015 British election. And I gave hundreds of interviews in 2016, all about saying that on the basic theory that the market is always right, because the record on Betfair was incredible. I think every single major election since 2001 had gone to the favourite 100 days out, and so you've got a lot of people piling into Remain or Clinton, really trying to buy money, and then. On the other hand, you've got this romantic outsider. In Britain, you had 17 million people who've pretty much waited all their lives to vote Leave, right? And it's 5 to 1, 4 to 1 at various points in the thing. So it's worth 10, 20 pounds. And then there's Trump, the non-politician, the celebrity, right? And it just captured everyone's imagination. And ever since then, it's attracted a new sort of punter, right? Yeah. It's just, first it attracted all the politicos, the people who were, wouldn't bet on sport ever or rarely. And now it's also all the sport punters want to have a small bet on the outsider.
Yeah.
It's become a fun bet.
Yeah. So you touch on that just in terms of like the SP for me, and the amount of liquidity and the weight of money, normally determines, and wisdom of crowd logic is that the prices on Betfair accurately reflect the probability. And then, as you touched on, Trump's one, he's traded at $10, $12 in the run. The Leave EU, what was that trading at? 5 to 1?
Bigger, about 10, 12 again, same thing in running on the night.
And then the Australian election was about $4.75, maybe $5. Well, the recent Liberal Party winning that. So is there any particular reason that you can sort of identify? Is it just that they were due for some different results than the market suggested, or did something specific happen with those markets, or the weight of money just sort of underestimating those outsiders?
I don't think there's an overall explanation. I think that probably that original sample was quite small. We only had a certain amount of elections to base that on, so we were due an upset. Yeah. So let's go through them. First of all, the referendum. The referendum, I think, I backed Leave in that. I made a lot of money backing against Remain, not because I didn't think we would leave. I just thought Remain was massively underpriced, and you could get under 55% on the night. It was amazing. The crucial thing there was just motivation to vote. You have, like I say, this national movement, if you like, of people who have waited to vote on that all their lives. And on the other hand, you've got the Remain voters who are largely young, liberal, less likely to be registered, Glastonbury Festival going on at the same time, just not that motivated. And they're known to not be reliable. You know, they've not turned out for Labour in the previous election, right? So it wasn't surprising. I always thought Leave would overperform, that there would be a specific group of people who'd just turn out to vote on that. So that was predictable. With Trump, well, it's hard for me because, you know, I lost a lot of money on that, and it's so you're always trying to, maybe I'm talking my own book. The thing that I think we got wrong, looking back, it wasn't underestimating Trump. It was overestimating Clinton.
Yeah.
It was simply that, again, she wasn't very good at getting her vote out, but also the problem was you had the two most unpopular candidates in history, right? And therefore that meant that you had all these third-party candidates, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, taking out like up to 10%, 12% in polls. And I never thought they would get that. I said all the way through, that will collapse. On the day, that will come right down. But I thought, and I think most of the pollsters thought, most of the pundits thought, it would split evenly or towards Clinton. And it didn't. Those undecided went for Trump. And they went for Trump in key places. So you just have those three states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that are, the polls aren't that far wrong. They're 3 or 4% wrong, right? They're sort of within the margin of error.
Yeah.
But again, it's because the third party vote either held up against Clinton or didn't, or just swung a bit differently. And, you know, the bottom line is, when you look at the result, she won by 2.9 million votes. It really was a fluke. It was a real statistical fluke. It's very unlikely that will ever happen again in history, that someone will lose. I know you can win the popular vote and lose electoral college, but 2.9 million votes, it's a hell of a situation.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's now, onto the Australian one, I'm not that well informed about it, but as I understand it, it's a far more conventional picture there, in that the left just overplayed their hand. Left overplayed their hand with environment policy, and there was a backlash. There was a late swing, a typical late swing to the insurgent, to the incumbent, which is what really is. That's the general history of political betting, that the incumbent gets a late boost.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I can see that. Just thinking through each individual example there, I see some similarities in the UK and the US, not just in terms of sort of the fear-based campaign, but also that the outside party were a lot more engaged. I think that the Trump fan base was so more than the Clinton fan base. You know, it's easy to sort of look back, but it seemed like you're not obligated to vote in the US, and it seemed like she didn't quite capture enough people. And you just touched on something about them being the least most popular candidates in history. Is that right? Is that determined by their just the polls going into it, or the approval ratings? What's that?
Approval ratings.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, just, you know, because it matters towards this one. One of the things that was rarely acknowledged in 2016 or after was that before Clinton became the nominee, they were regularly polling Clinton versus Trump, Sanders versus Trump, and Biden versus Trump. And she always fared worst, right? And likewise, when you had versus all the other Republicans, Ted Cruz and the Marco Rubios, she fared worst against all them as well. And he fared worst than all of them. Like, I always said that I spent, you know, the first 6 months of that year saying to Republicans over and over, as long as you don't pick Trump, you'll win, because she's beatable, right? So just pick Cruz, pick Rubio. But if you pick Trump, you'll lose, because he's the most toxic, divisive character ever. He won't win anyone over.
Yeah.
And then it goes the other way, you know?